Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's very nice to have you all here, and thank you, everybody that is following us through the internet. Here we are again for another lecture, and today we're going to talk about a very relevant topic about addiction. And I'm sure all of us can relate a little bit to this topic, so it's going to be very important to learn more about it and to learn what Spiritism can teach us about this. Okay, so we're going to have our friend Teresa to talk about that. And we will start with our initial reading and the prayer done by our friend Raquel.
Good morning, everyone. So we're gonna read from the book Happy Life by Alcoholism. You are not a distant observer of life. You are a member of the universal organism, invested with tasks and responsibilities. Carrying them out will lead to many successes for you. The position of a detached observer leads to erroneous viewpoints and conclusions. On the other hand, conscious participation gives the correct measures and provides a better understanding of the data at hand. Consider yourself a valuable person in the web of creation who is becoming more and more active in the Father's work and making it better known and respected. You are God's heirs, and the universe, in a way, belongs to you. So let's now close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, and all the beloved friends that are present here today with us. Let's thank them for the opportunity of being here together one more time, to learn more about Spiritism, to help our growth and development morally. Let's ask them to open our minds and our hearts for the lecture of today and inspire our friend Teresa so she may be able to deliver all the knowledge that she acquired during the practice of her lecture. Thank you. So be it.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to have you all here, present on the internet, spiritual plan, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about addictions, physical and moral. So we're going to go a little bit beyond what we normally think about when I think addictions, right? When I think addictions, we're very good at thinking about substance abuse, alcohol, smoking, but we're going to go a little bit beyond that, right? So addictions are also known as vices, and actually that's how the word that is used in the Spirits book and in the Gospel according to the Spiritism usually use the word vices. But the other word that we have for this is an addiction. That's what a vice it is, an addiction that we have, right? And there's many ways of you defining addiction, right? So, for example, for research in the medical field, they have their definition of what an addiction is. And actually, I used the CAMH definition. So it's the Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Canada, a very important center. And actually, if you look at their website, it's amazing. If you really want to know about any mental health, any addiction, like from definition to research to everything, they have a really, really amazing website with fantastic resources in there. And they even, it's like I was reading, and they even like clarified that we tend to use this word addiction as very loose way, like, oh, I have an addiction. Or because if I don't drink my coffee in the morning and then I'll get a headache, so it's because I'm addicted to coffee. That's not an addiction, right? But we have this tendency, right? Oh, I'm addicted to chocolate just because I love chocolate. Like, it's addiction is like the real addiction is something way more complex than that, right? So CAMH simplified the addiction on 4 C's. So it's craving, loss of control, compulsion, and use despite consequence. So basically, an addiction has to have all those four components. So it's something that I crave, and I'm not craving like, oh, you know, those craves that we have like today. I'm craving like having, you know, hamburger for lunch. No, it's the craving that you crave all the time. Okay, that becomes a compulsion. So I'm thinking about that the whole time, and then when I had my, you know, my dose of whatever is my addiction, I'm already thinking about the next dose, and then that goes, right? And loss of control, because I'm now craving all the time. If I'm compulsive searching from it, I already lost the control, right? So there's craving, control, compulsion, and also use despite consequence. So I know it's bad for me. I know I should not be doing it, but I still do it, right? I know that's harming my mental health. I know it's harming my physical health. I know it's harming my job, my personal relationships with family and friends, but it's bigger than me. And I need to seek that. And so I do it regardless of the consequence, even though I know the consequences are very bad, right? That's an addiction. It's when we have all those four together. Okay. And it can be divided in three main categories, right? Behavioral, because then again, we're all thinking about like, you know, being addicted to something, or we can be addicted to some behaviors, right? Such as, for example, some people are addicted to sex, addicted to gambling, addicted to shopping, right? So the same way that someone get their rush when they get their, you know, their line of cocaine, they can get the same rush just because they bought something. And then they had to buy something else, and something else, and something else. And a lot of times stuff they don't even use it, stays there. But they need that to feel fulfilled. But you need that, the more they buy, the more empty they are, right? But I need to, right? And some do this with gambling. How many people don't destroy their entire lives, lose everything, house, leave their home families homeless because they're addicted to gambling, right? And now that, unfortunately, in Ontario, you are allowed to do online gambling, which used to be prohibited in Canada. It made it even easier for those people to have access to their addictions, right? And then there's the obvious one, the substance addiction, which someone has this physical dependence on any type of chemical, right? And then it could be your alcohol, your cigarettes, can be your cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, whatever it is that I need to do to keep going. Not necessarily your coffee, unless you're drinking 10 coffees a day, and if you only need to think through your whole day is the coffee, and the coffee is dominating your life, then yes, it's an addiction, you know, otherwise it is not. Having your coffee in the morning, and if you don't have it, you get some headache, it's not an addiction, okay? Can be food. Some people are addicted to food, right? I cope, or so I use the food to cope with the emptiness, and I'm always eating it, and I'm always thinking about food, and you know, so that's as well another substance. And the other thing that we don't remember is, and it's way higher than we can think, is addiction to legal drugs, to prescriptions such as opioids. Like Canada these days, we talk so much about the opioid crisis because we prescribe so much that first of all, now we don't have stocks of it anymore, and also we have a huge addiction crisis to opioids, right? And in the past, someone would be able to go with the different prescriptions, or sometimes with the same prescription, to different pharmacies and get like refill their drugs, right? Now they did a safety measurement that you cannot do that anymore. If you use a prescription here, all pharmacies know that you already got your medication, so you won't be able to do that in Ontario, right? So this was one of the ways to kind of avoid this, but you still can get your opioids out there, right? If it's not me, I work in the medical field, and I have people that are like, oh, I cannot get it, so then my sister go and gets for me. My like family members find a way to get a prescription from the doctors and go fill out those opioids to their family member, because in their mind they think they're healthy, right? It's a huge problem. So we can be addicted to legal drugs, right? In fact, alcohol is legal. Cigarettes are legal, right? So food's legal. Oh, it has to be, we need to survive food, right? But that's true too, right? I was thinking about substance abuse, the legal stuff out there, like the fentanyl thing. But how about the legal stuff? You have no idea how big is the number of people addicted to illegal drugs? Okay. And then there's a third category that's impulsive addiction, which I learned about this. So it's some people have something called impulse control disorders. So it's a disorder where I have this impulse to do something and I have no control on it. And then because you have this disorder, it can lead to an impulsive addiction where I need to do all the time for me again to get the rush and something. An example, so what happened to those people that have those, oh, sorry, I did something here. And what happened with those people that have this impulsive disorder, control disorder, is that they struggle to manage their emotions and actions. So that, for example, is they can be addicted to theft, to have emotional bursts. So no matter what happens, now like those emotional bursts or destructive behavior. Okay? So for example, kleptomaniac. What's a kleptomaniac? It's someone who needs to steal. I need to steal just for the sake of stealing. And most of the time, those people and what's differentiating them from the person who has a professional, has a profession, it's my way of making my money, not an honest one, but nevertheless a profession. What it is that usually if I'm stealing because I want to profit, I'm going to steal, a lot of money, I'm going to steal the bank, I'm going to steal something that I'm going to profit from it, right? And I wanted this, and I'm going to use that money to, whatever it is. Those people usually what they tend to tackle something that's very little, like a candy bar, something that has like no really value, money, very low money value, stuff that they don't need, stuff that they actually have the money to buy. Like they didn't need to steal, they have the money to buy. But they need the rush of saying, I stole and I got away with the crime, right? It's impulse. That's part of this impulsive. So there's an addiction, and they become addicted. Right? There's an impulsive addiction where I need to do it all the time. And I have examples sometimes famous people, like many years ago, an actress was shoplifting. Clearly, she doesn't need to shoplifting. She has the money to pay for what she was doing, but that's mental health, right? And in fact, a lot of mental health can lead people to addictions, right? Every single addiction is a mental health issue, right? Not all mental health illness leads to an addiction, but all mental health addiction, all the addictions are a mental health issue, right? And in fact, think about it. Have you ever heard, so if you did, please let me know. But have you ever heard anybody who said, you know what, if you talk with anybody who has been addicted, is addicted, or has been addicted, especially to heavy drugs and stuff, right? If you ask them and say, why did you went into addiction? And they're also gonna say, they either a traumatic event, some emotions that they cannot deal with, something really bad happened to them. Have you ever heard something? I'm gonna tell you where I started. My life was so perfect, like perfect. Like my family is amazing. I had great parents, like, oh my gosh, so much love, so much happiness, love my job. Honestly, my life is great. I was so happy, but so happy that I decided to go to drugs. I need to run away from this. Have you heard of that? I haven't yet. So anybody heard about it? Let me know, because I would like to stay with this person, right? There's no such a thing. Usually when I talk with them, there's always either a traumatic event happening in their lives. At some moment in their lives, something may lead them to believe that they're not worth it anymore. And so usually when we're talking about addictions, usually those people do, it's a coping mechanism. Because we tend to see addictions as something bad, like someone who made a bad decision. No, it's a coping mechanism. That's what it is. I had a thing that's so hard for me to deal with, that was the way that I found to cope with it. It's a coping mechanism. We're very quick on judging people, right? And remember when I have these 4 C's, loss of control, compulsion, craving, use beyond consequence. Do you think it's easy to come out of it? Not at all. So yes, is it impossible? No, it's impossible. We all have the potential, the strength in us. But do you think it's easy to find that strength? Especially in a society that usually judge you more than support you. it's fantastic now we talk a lot about mental health and we need to, and I think that's a good beginning, but the supports are not really greatest still out there, right? So I always, and I deal mostly with, in my job, I deal mostly with alcohol addiction. People are sober now, right? But still nonetheless an addiction because alcoholism, there's no cure, right? Even if you can be sober for 20 years, you're still an alcoholic, right? And I always talk to the spiritual care guy in my work. He's an amazing guy. And I always talk that how unfair, for the lack of a better word, is the path of drug addiction or any addiction in that sense. Because it's a very easy path to go to, but a very, very hard one to get out of it. Very easy, right? You do your first drug, or you start your compulsions, or your gambling and this, and have the rush. Maybe you win a game, or and you have the rush from the drugs, and it's fantastic, right? It gives the momentary sensation that everything is great, right? So then you want the next one, and the next one, and then when you realize that all the pain that you cause around you, then on top of the pain that you had before already, that led you to have to use this coping mechanism, now you're gonna add all the guilt that you have from the consequences you create on people around you, everything. So it's a very, very hard pathway to get out of. So let's feel, if anything, let's feel compassion for our brothers and sisters who for some reason had a pain so huge that they could not deal with, that they had to go through this, that they found this, that unfortunately in this society that was the only coping mechanism they could find it. Okay? And I'm going to be bringing this back a little bit at the end, because we're going to tie all these physical addictions that we have with what I'm going to be bringing in the second part here. That I'm going to be talking about what the spiritism brings to us. Okay. So that's pretty much how in the medical field of research, that's how they define addictions, right? So we have different types. A lot of them are, they can be emotional, but they can also be a lot of it physical addictions. Okay? The philosophers define addiction as everything that's contrary to virtue. Okay? But the philosophers only talk about the ethical side, right? So for example, if I'm a business person and I do my business all in an unethical way, right, in a dishonest way, for them, I have an addiction, I have a vice, right? Because it's contrary to the virtue, which is to be honest, right? So basically anything that's contrary to what would be a virtuous person, that's what they call a vice or an addiction, right? They don't even look at the physical part or anything that the medical field looks into. They just look about the ethical part. Okay. And the third definition I want to bring is by spiritism. Okay. So spiritism brings a way broader meaning of the word addiction or vices, right? Because it actually puts all together. Spiritism agrees with the doctors bring to us, with medical field brings to us, with research brings to us. Says, yeah, it's true. That's all addiction, right? Also brings what the philosopher says. Yeah, it's true. Every time you what's contrary to vices, it's spiritual. So everything that's contrary to virtue is a vice or an addiction, right? But I think they just a little bit like, I'm really in there, right? So they all bring good parts of it, is very important. And spiritism put this all together, right? But also spiritism brings another part, which is moral, right? And the moral addiction will some way kind of tie a little bit closer with the ethical, okay? But spiritism brings them all together and also adds a little piece in there, which is the reincarnation. Because then it helps us to understand some of those addictions process as well, right? So it brings a more broad and bigger view of what is addictions and what's vices, what's virtues, and things like that. Okay? But first to talk addictions or vices, let's talk about virtues first, because you need to know what's the virtue, so then I know what's the contrary to it. So the Spirit's book is divided in 4 parts, and the last chapter on part 3, which is chapter 12 of part 3, is called It talks exactly about this, right? It's called Moral Perfection. That's the name of the chapter. And it starts right talking about virtues. So the first question, so spiritual books is dividing questions. So basically, Kardec did the questions, gave the questions to the spirits, and the spirits gave the answer, right? So the first question that Kardec does about this subject is question 893. And he asks, which is the most meritorious of all virtues? The answer is very long, okay? So I won't read the whole answer, but about two little pieces of the answer. It starts like saying, see, all virtues are meritorious because they are signs of progress on the path of good. So any good deed that we do, any sign of compassion, any moment that we show some compassion, some love to someone, some forgiveness, all those are virtues, okay? Every time I help someone who was in need, those are all virtues, because that shows that we are in the path of goodness, right? That we understand that we're here to help each other, right? It says, but the highest virtue consists in the sacrifice of one's own interests for the good of one's neighbor without ulterior motives. Good luck with that one. I can almost go to this part right here. Sacrifice the one's own interest to the good of one's neighbor. Then the rest, without ulterior motives, that's hard. Because we are always expecting at least a thank you after. The least, right? I always like to bring the example when you hold the door to someone, right? And this person just stands by and don't say anything, you're like, you're welcome. Right? Like, hello, I'm here. I held the door for you. Because that's what we do. When you do something good to others, you usually want some kind of recognition. Right? The least we want a thank you. The least that we look for. Right? So that second part, it's very hard. Okay? But why, I'm just giving an example what he's telling here. Let's say I finish my day of work, I'm on TTC, I'm sitting down, you know, I had a good day, I'm not tired, and someone comes in, it's either an elderly, or someone's pregnant, or someone's crutches, and I decided to get up to this person to sit down because, you know, the law says that I have to, and just because it's the nice thing to do, so I'm gonna get up and do it, right? It's easy. That's an act of kindness. Yes, that's an act of kindness. That's a virtue, because a lot of people don't even do it. The person is standing right here, and a lot of times we are on our cell phone. I don't even care if there's people around me, and this elderly or this pregnant woman or someone's beside me, and I wouldn't even stand up, right? Or sometimes I know it's like, no, I'm not standing up, right? So the fact that I got up, it was just because it's like, oh, I'm just gonna do because it's the right thing to do, you know, and because the law says it's still an act of kindness. So this is, you know, in the path of goodness, because it's trying to live there as a society, right? But now imagine I had a really long day of work. My work is physical. Let's say work construction. It's really heavy work. I'm exhausted, and I was so lucky that I got that one seat in the TTC. And honestly, like, this moment to have to stand and go work to home on the TTC standing would be a killing, right? But then all of a sudden, here it comes. Someone with crutches comes in and it's right there. And I look and I say, you know what? I'm still gonna get up because yes, I am tired, but this person needs more than I do. And I get up and I give it, right? And then I don't even expect a thank you or anything. I do because it's the right thing, because that's my impulse to do it. I'm not expecting anything. It's just, you know, I am sacrificing my own good in here to help this person, right? That's the thing here. That's the highest level, right? It's when I do something that probably wouldn't be the best for me, but you know what? But it doesn't matter. I can do it, and I'm going to do for someone else who needs me more than I do. Or for example, someone calls you to, we're very good at helping people who need it. If I have the time, if you know, if it's convenient to me. But how about the person calls and say, hey, I need some help. I need you to help me to move something. I'm desperate. And then you say, oh my gosh, I need to go to groceries because I have no milk. If I don't do the groceries tonight, I have no milk for tomorrow for my breakfast, or I'm missing something. And then most of the times like, oh, I would love to help, but I can't, right? And if we step just like, yes, okay, you know what, I didn't enjoy this meal for tomorrow, I have nothing for breakfast, but it's fine. I'll buy a bagel on my way to work tomorrow, like whatever, but I'm gonna go help this person. Not that often we do this, right? Because it's not convenient to me, it's not a good time for me. Not very often we sacrifice something that would be convenient to me to go help someone, right? So that's what I'm saying. And then if you do on top of that again, right? Because then that's the thing here. That's what I'm saying. The hardest part is this without ulterior motive. Because then if I really sacrifice, like I didn't even go, so I didn't go to do my grocery shop that I really, really need to do. When then I helped you and you didn't say thank you, or the next time I need your help, you say that you cannot help me. Oh, can you believe this? After I didn't go to buy my grocery shops and I went to help this person, so right there. Without ulterior motives, is down the drain. That's what I'm saying. This without ulterior motives for me is the hardest part. The hardest part. Because we all want something. If you help something, you want them to help us back. Or want to thank you, or we want some kind of a compensation. Because even the thank you, that's what it is, a compensation. That's usually how we do. Right? But listen, if you're already doing something good to someone, how he said, this is all virtues. This all shows that we are in the path of goodness. Okay, so let's not, kick ourselves or be mad at ourselves that we still cannot do without ulterior motives. Because any sign of goodness, it is a virtue. It shows that we're in the path of goodness. Okay. And then what are our virtues? Is any sense of compassion, love, empathy, forgiveness, charity, faith, to understand that there's something above us that's here to support us, right? And having faith is not just a matter of, oh yeah, I believe in God, oh I believe in Jesus. No, it's beyond that. Faith is to trust, is to, when things are tough and difficult, have resignation. That if for some reason this is going to be a learning opportunity to me, because we need to start to forget and erase it from our minds this God that punishes us. God does not punish anybody. This revengeful God that if you did something wrong, something bad's going to happen to you. Well, probably if you did something wrong, it's going to happen just because of the action of reaction. If I keep if I punch this wall here and my hand hurts, is God punishing me because I punched the wall? No, it's my own doing. I punched the wall and I chose to punch the wall. Yeah, it's going to hurt. It's just a loss of action and reaction. And if anything, what God does is to give us an opportunity to restart, to redo, to re-educate ourselves, and to fix what we have done. That's what it is. There's no punishment, right? So faith. So all the things that if we build up those things inside of us, compassion, love, charity, sense of fraternity, look at the other ones around us as our brothers and sisters. This is all virtues. These are the virtues that we need to build up inside of us. So then, Kardec goes to ask about vices. Right? In fact, the chapter talks way more about vices, right? Because there's way more stuff to explore there than virtues is very easy and simple, right? Not easy to practice. It's very easy and simple, right? So on question 895, he asks, he says, okay, besides for the vices that we all have no doubt about, for example, talking about vices, talking about, your drugs, this, and that, all those vices, we know it, and we all recognize them as a vices, as addictions, right? He asks, what is the most characteristic sign of imperfection? So what's the worst addiction that we can have? What's the worst vice that we can have? And he just answers, well, the answer is also long, but he just starts with self-centeredness, aka selfishness. That's the biggest. It's the worst that we can have it, right? And he brings something that's very important for us to understand, right? He says individuals may possess real qualities that make them appear moral to the world, so to society, right? But it takes only one touch of self-centeredness to unmask this individual's true character. And here he's talking about, because here when he talks about vices and virtues, we're talking about moral, right? Because compassion, love, charity, that's all moral values, right? Forgiveness, right? And it's now here talking about moral as well. But how much times here in our society, just because someone, works as a job, an honest job, pay their bills and their family, everything, we see those people are being like moral people, right? All the moral, and not necessarily, just because they're polite all the time, they have good manners, that does automatically make them highly moral people. And he says, not really. He says, watching your world seems to be moral in the spiritual plan, you get a little bit more than that, right? It doesn't really quite cut, make the cut in there, right? An example of that is in the book by self-graph by Chief Xavier, by the spirit of Andrea Luiz. It's called Action and Reaction. It's actually a fantastic book. In the book, there is one of the characters, I won't tell much of the story, but there is a character in the book called Druzo. So Druzo in the spiritual plan, he's the head, like the director of this place called Mansion of Peace. So Mansion of Peace, it's a kind of a station that works under nosso lar, right? In spiritual world, and it pretty much is a station in the umbral, so the low realms where all the spirits that less evolved, nonetheless our brothers and sisters, are rescued. So the spirits were ready to leave that, really has a desire to leave that dark environment. They go and they rescue them, and he's the director, right? But Druzo, in a previous reincarnation, was a man who was married, had a wonderful wife, actually was a way more evolved spirit than him, incarnated and discarnated, right? And he had a son. And as a man in society, he was a man who, they had like good lifestyle, so probably close to being rich people, had a good lifestyle, a man who worked, who was an intellectual, very calm, very proper, good manners, very polite to everybody, he had a good lifestyle to his family. So in society, he was regarded as someone who was a very higher moral person, right? Very respected, moral, high standard person. But the truth is, he's someone who is neutral. Yeah, he was educated and smart, good manners, treated everybody well, but that was about it. And while the wife was trying to guide the son, was literally going to the wrong path because he had an easy life. And why go to university? Why to study? And I was like, why don't you go to, do medical school? How many people could help with doing that? And, well, I don't know, it's nicer to have a party and keep going. And while she's trying to guide the son to the good path, the husband's out in his library reading his books, right? Treated the wife with good manners, treated her with respect, treated the family with respect. That's about it. That's about it. To society, highly moral person, spiritually talking, very poor morally, right? Because he didn't go beyond this polishment that society asks us to have, right? What society says that you're a good person, right? But there's nothing there. He didn't do anything beyond that, right? And in fact, you keep going with the book, like exactly how he said in here, right? Some of them appear to be moral to the world, but they only need one touch of self-centeredness, and the true colors will show up. And they keep fast forward the book, and he kills someone because touch his pride, right there. Because his wife dies, he remarries, and he ends up killing his second wife out of pride. There's a whole story that happens in there, but out of pride. Wasn't he that polite man? Very, well behaved, controlled, calm. Just need one touch to get him out of that, that stable state that he was, to show that he was not that calm, he was not that centered, he was not that, to see how he changed. So sometimes being a moral person, it's not, just this presence that we have. Right? It goes way beyond that. It's how we really treat people. Do we do, and also, do I do anything that beyond my family? Because I can keep my family, but do I go beyond that? And yes, as parents, as kids, we all have a responsibility inside our family. We do have, and we should to be responsible. But we need to also to go beyond, because in the end, it's just one family. It's a one God, and all sons and daughters of the same God. It's one universal family. So we need to go beyond that. So he fulfilled everything that he needed. Society told him that he had to fulfill as as the father of the family, especially at the time, because the story is probably end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, right? So the man has to fulfill everything that society told him to fulfill. We need to go beyond that, because we're not here to live for society. There's a life that's way beyond that. Right? So being a moral person and developing the virtues, it goes way beyond that. Right? And then the Gospel according to the Spiritism, and the Spiritist book always teaches that selfishness and pride always go hand in hand. And in fact, they teach us that selfishness and pride, they are the root of all the other vices. Vanity, greedy, everything. Like you get all the other vices that we had, the root is always our selfishness, self-centeredness, and pride. Right? Pride is so hard to work on, because I'm trying. I need a few more incarnations, but it is. We all do. If you all really look inside of us and do a really good analysis of us, those are the two big addictions that we have. More often than we think more about ourselves or our families than people out there. Do you want a good example? Pandemic. March 2020. Could you find toilet paper? Someone please explain the toilet, because I till this day I don't understand the toilet paper thing. If there is chaos coming, I have a huge list of things that will come before the toilet paper. Could you find it? But some people could. And they started, like, I'm pretty sure there's people using the toilet paper from March 2020 to this day in their houses. Right? Toilet paper, water, because people are like, oh, if it's contamination through the water, so I need mine. So I save my family, and the rest, I don't care. As far as I save my family, which the truth is, if everybody just had gone and bought the normal toilet paper for everybody, and we'll all be okay. Because toilet paper was not a problem. Neither the water. But see how different that is. So I know pandemic brought a lot of things negative, but I think it brought a lot of positive things, because it really makes surface. Again, see, one touch in our self-centeredness to show up, was to run and spend for yourself. That's all we do. Whole society reacts like that, or at least a good chunk of the society reacts like that, right? I'm gonna fend for myself, right? That's why in Brazil you have the expression, right? Each one for themselves and God for everybody. So it's like, I'll do for myself, but you got to help, right? That's how we do. Okay? Selfishness and pride. Okay? We all carry, we all do. In some moment here or there, we all do, and it's okay, right? And in fact, in the book, it says that someone who's totally selfless in your planet is extremely rare. But it's so rare that when someone shows up like that, everybody's like, wow. Right? We all talk about them. Like, how many Mother Teresa do you know? How many? How many Gandhis are out there? Right? How many Dalai Lamas are out there? How many Chico Xaviers or Divaldo Franks out there? And we can count. need more than two hands here to count. It's rare, completely selfless, zero attached to material life, right? In terms of not the age, they had clothes, they had all the minimum to survive because we need our body needs food, needs water, needs clothing, you know. If you go outside right now without a good jacket, you're gonna die of hypothermia, right? And we have moral obligation to take care of our bodies, right? But they only get what they needed. Just that's it. You did extra, all the superfluous that we all do and have. No attachment. It's no value for them, right? Very rare, right? So don't worry. We go up on this category because we're all together. We're all together, you know. Welcome to the bus. We're all together riding the same journey. The journey to get better and to understand. But we need to start to do this self-awareness, right? To know who we are, right? To recognize our addictions. And then I'm going to talk about some addictions that I think none of us have, but it's good for us to think about it because we don't think them as addictions. For example, gossiping, judging. You can read the whole CAMH site. They don't want to talk about gossiping as addiction, gossiping, judging, right? Complaining. Complain, that's a good one. Like nobody complains on anything. Not at home, not at work, never, right?
No.
Totally fine with that one. It's an addiction. This is a vice, that's a habits that we create that we don't even notice. We are addicted to complaining. We are addicted to gossiping. Okay? So there's this famous priest in Brazil, priest Fábio de Mello. That one time just before Easter, for the Catholics, they have the Lent, right? In Brazil, we call it the Quaresma, right? The Lent. So that's 40 days before Easter. And I have some friends who are Catholic, and they have seen that during those 40 days, you do like a promise that you're not going to do something for 40 days. And it usually has to be something that's hard for you. So for 40 days, I won't eat chocolate. For 40 days, I won't drink. For 40 days, I won't, whatever you promise, right? And he did a video that I think was fantastic. Because he said, you know what? Why didn't we stop doing this promises that from 40 days I won't eat chocolate or this or that? Because really, it makes no difference. It doesn't change your moral, it doesn't change who you are. So why don't we do like this? Why don't we do 40 days without gossiping? Why? And he's right. And then it goes like a list of things. It's right. Let's try 40 days, not asking the whole year. Maybe enjoy it and keep going. You know, let's try to do 40 days without complaining. Zero. Because really, but that's true because we complain way more than we think. But if you now have to consciously think about that you cannot complain and you start to really watch yourself, you're going to realize that you complain way more than you think. We all complain more than 40 days without complaining. At home, I can do it because I live alone.
Well, you might be mentally complaining.
Yeah, that's true too. I can complain about spiritual plan. I can be home and still complain about work. You're right, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at work, I can go 4 hours without complaining. 40 days, right? What we do? Addiction. That's a moral addiction. Complaining, gossiping, judging, right? When we judge our brothers and sisters who have physical addictions, drugs, because they don't have willpower. If they have willpower, they couldn't do it. They just don't drugs because they want to. Because if they really want it, they get out of that. Yeah, it's true. If they all have the willpower to come out, but have you been in their shoes? To criticize them? Do you know how hard it is to criticize them? It's easy, right? No, it's not easy. Easy to point fingers. Hard to sound. And the other thing too, and I want to think of reincarnation. Are you sure that in a previous reincarnation, or some people that you also not sure that they've also failed to overcome that? You sure? That we can point fingers? Because I want to remember this incarnation. What am I to point fingers? And no matter what it is. Or even point fingers to people like, oh, you're gossiping. Yeah, you do it as well. I used to do it. So we can all point fingers to people. Right? We need to, and actually instead of looking at yours, let's look at ourselves. What do I do? What are my addictions? What are my moral addictions? Right? That's very important, right? So, and those are all the addictions that are very hard that we haven't even don't notice. But when you notice and we try to change, we realize it's very hard. Like I said, try to go like a week without complaining, a week without judging, a week without gossiping, a week when I'm gonna forgive everybody who did something to me. A week that I'm gonna show more compassion. See, it's easy. Don't complain the traffic as well, people who drive. When the guy cuts you, it's like, oh, God bless you. I'm so happy you cut me. You know, it's not really what you've done. That's fine. It's very hard. You know why? Because that demands inner transformation. And inner transformation is very hard. And that's why in one of the questions, the Kardec asked, but how can we do that? And he says, well, you follow what the philosopher told you in the past, which is referring to Socrates. Know thyself. When you start to look inside of ourselves and recognize who we are, our virtues, our vices, behave for our virtues, nourish them, right? Also not to, because others will look to and see your vices and be terrible and feel terrible about yourself. That's not what it's about. It's just to start to notice those mechanisms that I have inside, like, oh yeah, usually that's how I react to this situation. Maybe I should start to react in a different way. And then you try, and then again you react towards like, okay, now again. And that's okay. We're gonna have more and more opportunities, but we don't want to change what we don't notice that we have. Right? We won't. We won't change. But if we start to look inside of ourselves and recognize who we are, sometimes we need to get in therapy to go figure out who we are. It doesn't matter what's the path it is, but you know who we are, our process are. And then we start slowly change. Nobody's gonna become a pure spirit in one life. That's why we have so many lives here, so many trials, and we have people around who can help us as well, right? But we need to start to make this inner transformation. But it's very hard to change habits and addictions that we had there for a long time. A long time, for me, especially a long time in my age, and this incarnation, but then previous reincarnations. We've been here already. But it's not easy. So we have to have compassion. When I say to have compassion, forgiveness, love, it's to ourselves as well. So let's have a little bit of compassion for ourselves. Forgive our mistakes, because that's probably one of the hardest things, right? And that's why Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. We need to love ourselves first. We need to have compassion to ourselves, and then we can give. I cannot give what I don't have. Right? If I don't forgive myself, how am I going to forgive the others? If I don't love myself, how am I going to love the others? Right? And that's made very clear that when he says here that sacrifice oneself for the good of someone, it doesn't mean to lose my self-love. That's completely different aspect. Right? I still love myself. I still take care of myself. But I'll do something to someone that maybe is not convenient to me, but it will help them. Right? Maybe it's not the right time for me, or whatever it is, I'm going to do it. Right? And working on our moral evolution, working on this inner transformation is the best way to prevent the auto addictions that were spoken in the beginning. Right? Because maybe if I can have more compassion, faith, if I have self-love, when I go through some hardship, instead of going through the path of drugs or alcohol or even cigarettes, because cigarettes you don't see it, but a lot of people say, oh, I'm stressed, I need a cigarette. It's a coping mechanism, right? We're less likely to resort to those kinds of coping mechanisms. We'll find different coping mechanisms. I'm going to go talk to my psychologist. I'm going to talk with my friends. I'm going to just cry with someone and let it come out, whatever it is. Or I'm just going to use my faith and resignation and understand if it's time to stop, something has to come out, something I have to learn from it, and we find the strength to, to keep going. But if us as individuals and as a society, if you don't develop it, all those virtues, if we start to be a little bit less selfish, more and more people is going to resort to those kind of coping mechanisms. Because the good coping mechanisms are not there, individually and as a society, right? So the more we develop those values of love, charity, for ourselves and for the others, the more we develop in our faith, we'll have better mechanisms for coping with those hardships. Right? How many people, for example, will resort to alcohol because of the loss of a loved one? Right? Parents that lost a child and the pain of losing that child lead them to alcohol, especially. Right? Sometimes could be drugs as well. It's coping mechanism. The pain, it's in my work. I always say I never saw a bigger pain in my work than a parent losing their children. Right? So if you don't have the good coping mechanisms in yourself and us as a society to help each other, yes, it's going to hurt too much. And then maybe I'll resort to alcohol to run away from that pain. Right? So we need to develop our virtues, be a little bit less self-centered, a little bit less selfish. Right? Then we stop bullying. We stop doing all those hard things that are happening right now in our society. So I kind of want to finish today exactly with this question to us. Right? How many cases of addiction in our society could be prevented if we lived a life in a society that is less selfish? How many would be ready to help each other? People won't feel alone, because that's what it is, hopeless, alone, right? And sort to the other kind of addictions, right? Could be, or even mental health, right? Because a lot of mental, especially depression, can lead a lot of people to addictions, right? It would be easy for them to cope with their mental health, for us to cope with our mental health. It's easy for us to, avoid the physical addictions. So we have always to remember that, yes, there is the physical addictions, but also the moral addictions, and there we also have to work inside of us. So let's think how would be our society if we really have a bit more compassion, love, and charity. Right? How much better would be if we didn't have this selfishness, so much selfishness around us, right? But together we all can start working, and we cannot change society, but we can change ourselves, right? And I think, you remember again, your mother just said, be the change that you want to see in the world. So if you want the world to change yourself first. Right? But we usually wait for the government to solve the problem. The world has to change, it's never me. It was each one of us. But to do a little bit better. That's what we ask, just a little bit better. Right? And we start to be a little bit more compassionate and feel a little bit more empathy for each other. And that's what I have for today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Teresa. It was a very, very nice lecture. Any questions or comments? Nothing from the internet as well. I'll just finish with a summary. I think the key point from what you said for us to take at home, like to take home message, I think is understanding that the main root for all devices is selfishness. We need to understand that. And more importantly, understand how we improve that in ourselves. It's only by starting knowing ourselves. Otherwise, we'll never be able to really do this inner transformation that is so important. And we see that it's very easy, and we are all very good on that, in pointing fingers, right? We see the problems from the others easily, but we never look into ourselves and see what in myself I can change, and I have to change. And we cannot change the others. We cannot change even your kids. We cannot change much. We have a role as parents to help them, and guide them. But in reality, we cannot transform them totally. Will be them that will need to find that pathway. So the same thing, we cannot change anybody around us but ourselves. So that's where we should start. And the only way is by really doing that auto reflection and auto assessment every day.
Yeah, and there's so many other, like, could say, like, now we're talking about addiction, right? So many other things. Some people, for example, are addicted to being a victim, always a victim. Oh, I cannot help because I don't know my life. My life's so hard. Everything is difficult for me. Oh, nothing is good. I was reading a book now recently called Pontos y Contos. Unfortunately, it's not translated to English. It's a great book. Each chapter is a separate story, and one of them is like this: a spirit who came and had to work on her patience. He said, "You're gonna have to patience and resignation." And instead, when she comes, she's all ready to come. She reincarnates and everything. And she's married, has kids. The husband is a loving husband, very supportive, but she's addicted to this victim. And it's, oh, my life is horrible. Oh, I cannot help anybody else because my life is terrible. Everything is terrible. So it's much easier to be like the victim, right? It's an addiction. Addicted to being a victim. So there's so many different addictions in there, moral addictions that we don't even notice. So if we don't do this inner transformation in ourselves, we don't start to look at ourselves and sometimes be a little bit more grateful. Because then it comes the complaint, right?
Yeah.
Instead of a complaining, maybe a little bit more grateful for what we have. So that's the tendency that we have, is used to complain. So there's 10 things here. One goes wrong, we spend an hour complaining about this one thing that's wrong. And for the other 9, that's good. Right? That's what we're trying to do.
All right. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone in the internet that followed us today, and we hope to see you again next Sunday at 11 a.m. And we're gonna continue here with our classes. So basically, most of you are